And thank you very much for joining us on this webinar where Dr. Ocker, our course tutor and microscope expert for Live Blood Online, will be answering your questions on choosing the right microscope for live blood analysis. I am Elizabeth, the presenter at Live Blood Online, and I'm going to be handing you over to Dr. Ocker in a few minutes. Just to let you know that this webinar is being recorded, and we'll be sending you the recording. So if you have to leave us, if you want to go over the information again, you'll be able to watch the recording later. And we have received your questions. Thank you very much for sending them in. Dr. Ocker will be answering them, and we'll be answering any questions that you may have during the webinar. So to post your questions, you will see a panel on your screen, and in there you will see a questions panel. So if you can just locate that now and type in OK, so I know that you found it. And then any questions throughout the webinar, please type them into that box and we'll get them answered for you. Also, the full screen button, which is usually the fourth button down, is the best way of viewing the webinar. So let's join Dr. Ocker now and pose the questions that have been raised so far. Hello, Dr. Ocker. Thank you for joining us today. Are you ready for some questions?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Elizabeth, and thank you everyone for joining us.
Marvelous. So the first question we've got is, what is the difference between the 4 microscope models on the Live Blood Online website?
All right, so there are 4 microscopes available on the website, and they basically, the main difference would really just be the light source and the type of camera. So you'll see the first one is the HDMI-LED microscope that has a HDMI and USB high definition camera, and then an LED light source. And then the rest of them vary. So there's a microscope that has a 50-watt halogen light source and an HDMI high definition camera. Then we have a microscope that has a standard definition USB microscope with the LED light source. And then the fourth one is a system with a standard definition USB camera and a 50-watt halogen light source. Now, all the other specs are all the same. So the number of objectives, the magnification range, and everything else is the same. It's just really that the cameras are different and there are some options with the illumination. The most popular choice that most practitioners opt for is the top of the range unit, the HDMI-LED system. Because there are some real advantages of having a high definition camera and also the LED light source, and I could perhaps go into detail on that a little bit just to clarify. The LED light source is superior to halogen because of a high degree of brightness. So the LED light source has a 9-watt LED lamp, which is equivalent to about 100-watt halogen, and that's then compared to the 50-watt halogen on the halogen microscopes. It's not, the 50-watt halogen is not quite as bright, and the brightness really plays a big role with dark field analysis, and we'll actually go through some slides later on to actually illustrate how important the light source is for dark field. And also with the LED light source, of course, LED lights have a very, very long lifespan, a maintenance-free lifespan of up to 25 years, where you don't really need to do anything to it. Whereas with a halogen light source, you would need to replace the lamp occasionally, or periodically, twice a year or so, you'd have to replace the lamp. And there's other considerations as well. The halogen light does create a bit of heat, so it does place a bit of strain on the components of the microscope, whereas LED is completely cold light, 100% pure white light as well with LED, whereas with halogen, the light, as it ages, as the light bulb ages, there's a shift in the light towards the red side of the spectrum, so there's a slight change in the quality of the color of the light in halogen systems. So that's not an issue with LED at all. And then in terms of the camera, the HDMI USB camera, the high definition camera, has dual video output. So it has two video outputs. One goes to your computer or laptop via USB, and then the other output goes via HDMI to a separate screen, which is quite quite ideal. You know, it's quite convenient in a practice type of setting, because often your client would be sitting across the desk from you, and it's not really ideal for you to be moving your computer or laptop screen around. So you're able to have the blood displayed in full screen on a separate monitor with this HDMI camera.
Okay, thank you. So it's basically the two cameras, high definition and standard definition, and the two light sources, then LED and halogen. Is that right?
Absolutely, 100%.
Okay, thank you. And the second question, will I be able to see all the anomalies covered in the training course with all four models?
Yes, absolutely. So all the microscopes that we have available are suitable for live and dry blood analysis in bright field and dark field. And you will be able to see all the anomalies that we've covered in the training with all four microscopes. It's just the, what I mentioned earlier, that will affect it slightly. So you might have to replace a light bulb on your halogen system, and you don't have the dual output on the standard definition USB camera.
Okay, thank you. And what is the cost of shipping of the microscopes?
Right, so in terms of shipping, we actually have free shipping at the moment on the microscopes. We ship with DHL. So that's usually quite fast, about 3 to 5 days is the transit time, fully trackable as well, so you're able to track the progress, during the shipment. So we've actually not had any problems with DHL.
And are there any taxes or import costs?
Yes, there are. So shipping is included, so there won't be an additional cost for shipping, but there will be some payment that would be due when the microscope arrives in your country. These are just import costs, so they're basically import taxes that would need to be paid, and that has to be paid by the recipient directly to the customs in their country. Now usually the fee is about in the region of about 70 to 75 US dollars, so it's not a huge expense.
Thank you. And do you provide technical support with the microscopes?
Yes, absolutely we do. So the microscopes will require some basic assembly when you receive it, and we have support with regards to that as well. So we have quite a detailed step-by-step instructional video that shows you exactly how to assemble the microscope. And of course, we do also have video support. So if you're struggling with anything, we can have a video call and go through what you're struggling with. But these microscopes also have been designed to be fairly easy to use, to be user-friendly. There's no unnecessary features on them that make them difficult to work with. They're really quite simple. Once you get over the initial fear that people have when they get something new, and you get familiar with it, it's actually really easy to work with.
Is there a warranty included?
Yes, definitely. So there's a 2-year warranty included on all the microscopes.
And do you sell spare parts if something becomes faulty on the microscope?
Yes, absolutely. So if anything goes wrong during the warranty period, we would replace those parts obviously free of charge. And if it's after the warranty period, if there's a part that needs to be replaced, we do keep the parts and we will be able to send them to you. We have parts in stock. We ensure that everything is always in stock, and because we realize that practitioners rely on the microscopes, and any type of downtime in practice due to some technical issue is obviously going to be a problem. So we have stock and we're able to send it again with DHL, so it's quick and fast delivery.
Thank you. Shahida is saying that she can't hear. So Shahida, please, if you could just log out and log back in again, that most of the time that solves the problem. So if you'd like to do that, please. Thank you. And the next question is actually probably just been answered. What happens if something goes wrong with the microscope?
Yes. So as I mentioned, we send replacement parts during the warranty period free of charge. And after the warranty period, we're able to send them, and we'll just charge for the parts and the shipping. We really haven't had any major issues with the microscopes, but in case there is a problem that needs someone to actually work on the microscope, where a technician is actually needed, then we would subcontract someone out in your area that will come and work on the microscope and effect the repair if it's necessary. We ship these microscopes all over the world to our attendees, and so far we haven't had the need to do that, but that is available if in a case where it actually is required.
Okay, and we've put these two questions together. One is, do these microscopes have phase contrast? And two, why don't you use phase contrast?
Right, fantastic. So yeah, the microscopes don't have phase contrast as an option on them. It is possible to add phase contrast. We can add it on if it's something that you're really interested in and you really want to use it. We don't really cover phase contrast in the course materials because phase contrast doesn't really provide you with any additional information that you won't get from Darkfield and Brightfield. Phase contrast became popular because it's less costly in terms of the build of the microscope. You don't require as strong a light source for phase contrast, and it allows you to see some of the anomalies that you'll see in Darkfield and some of the anomalies that you'll see in Brightfield, but it certainly doesn't allow you to see everything that you'll see with a good Brightfield and Darkfield system. So there's not really any additional benefit of doing phase contrast, but it is, as I said, it is available. We can add it onto the system. The other challenge with phase contrast is that you need a dedicated phase contrast objective on the microscope. So your normal objectives that you use for Brightfield and Darkfield won't work for phase contrast. So you would basically need to decide which type of objective, what magnification you'd like to have for phase contrast, and then basically one of the other objectives that you have on the microscope would then have to be replaced with a phase contrast objective.
Okay, now we get quite a few questions about there are a lot of different microscope systems that are available, many of them claiming to be Darkfield microscopes. Some of these systems are very cheap as well. And we have many attendees asking us if these would be suitable for live blood analysis. And why are these cheaper microscopes not suitable? So I don't know if you want to answer that now or later with your demonstration.
Yeah, we will be covering that in quite a lot of detail during the slides that we'll be going through. I have some slides of live blood samples in Darkfield that actually illustrates what happens to the sample when any of the specifications that we have on our systems is changed. So if any of the specifications are changed, you actually end up with a compromise in terms of what you're able to see in a live blood sample. So it really comes down to the actual specifications of the microscopes, and we have the most important ones as well listed in sort of descending order of importance as well, and we'll be looking through those later on in the slideshow.
Okay, so that issue will be answered throughout, yes, because we do get it a lot.
Absolutely, yeah, and understandably, because the price difference, some of these so-called darkfield microscopes are really quite cheap. Uh, so it's quite tempting, you know, if you looking at purchasing a system, but the cost is really, the price difference is really justified. We've researched what is available um, from microscope suppliers all over the world, and we've not found a system with the same set of specifications as the systems that we have for a better price. You know, so you know, as the saying goes, if you compare apples with apples, we actually have the best priced system available.
Okay, and the other problem, of course, is that a lot of suppliers out there that say they have dark field microscopes for live blood analysis don't actually know the specifications and the intricacies of live blood analysis. It's not that they are deliberately lying, they just actually don't know, do they?
Yeah, absolutely. You're quite right. You know, so these are usually just microscope companies that supply laboratory microscopes and various microscopes for the sort of microscope industry, and they're not aware of the actual specifications that are required for dark field live blood analysis. So those other microscopes can probably be used for other applications where dark field would be needed, but in terms of live blood analysis, you really won't be able to see what you're supposed to see in dark field with those microscopes. You know, the specifications that we use on our microscopes are built especially for us according to our own specifications, and the specs that we use are the specifications that was actually determined by Michael Coyle from New Life Sciences in the US many years ago. And those are the specifications also based on the work that was done in pleomorphism many years ago in live blood as well. Now, of course, his microscope company is no longer open, and the microscopes that they provided are no longer available, but we've looked at the specifications and we've had these microscopes developed around those specifications.
Thank you. And another question. Why do we recommend these 4 microscopes and not any other dark field microscopes that are available online?
All right. So that again relates to the specifications that we are going to be looking at. So we'll go through those in detail during the slides as well.
Okay, that seems to be all of the questions for the moment. So any more, please put them in the questions box.
All right, fantastic. Well, let's get started then. I'm going to just go through the specifications that you need to look for in a dark field microscope. So as I said, for live blood analysis, to be able to actually see all the anomalies in dark field that have been covered in the course, your microscope needs to have a very specific set of features. And you know, if any one of those features are you know, if you don't have any one of those features on the microscope, you'll find that there will be a compromise in terms of what your samples will look like and what you will be able to see in a sample. And of course, that then will impact on your success in practice. You know, if you're not able to see all the anomalies that you should see, you won't really be able to make an accurate analysis, and you know, you won't be able to implement the correct interventions either in your clients. All right, so we've listed the most important specifications here in sort of descending order of importance. So if you are looking at dark field microscopes, definitely keep this on hand and look at these features and compare the microscopes that you come across to the systems that we have available. So firstly, illumination. So on our LED microscopes, they are equipped with a 9-watt LED light source, which is equivalent to about 100 watts halogen. And that really is important. The brightness, the level of brightness is absolutely essential when it comes to dark field. So if you don't have adequate brightness going into the sample, you really won't be able to get that highly contrasted background where you have a dark black background with, you know, bright cells and components in the sample. Right, magnification range. So this is also really important, and you'll see that there's a difference there between the magnification range through the eyepieces and on the screen. So on the microscopes through the eyepieces, the magnification range is 40 to 1,000 times, whereas on the screen there's a higher level of magnification, about 4 times higher than what is available through the eyepieces. And the reason for that is that the analysis of most of the anomalies in live blood, the magnification required there is at least 1,000 times. So with the standard setup, on a standard microscope, if you need to achieve a magnification of 1,000 times on the screen, you would need to use the 100 times objective to actually achieve a magnification of 1,000. And we will be looking at some examples of samples viewed with a standard type of 100 times objective, which is 99% of your standard laboratory microscopes have this type of objective. And you'll see that you really can't see much detail with that standard 100 times objective. So inevitably what most people do then is they end up using the 40 times objective for their live blood viewing, and they then have a 400 times magnification on the screen. So we'll be looking at some examples of that as well, and you'll see what a big difference this makes. It's really, really essential. So with our microscopes with the 40 times objective, because of this additional magnification on the screen, you achieve 1,600 times magnification, which is really, really ideal for picking up the anomalies in live blood. Right, so this can also be expressed as a magnification ratio between the eyepieces and on the screen, a 1:4 magnification ratio. Right, and then thirdly, Darkfield Condenser, really very important as well. We use the oil immersion Darkfield, cardioid Darkfield Condenser. It's interchangeable, so you would remove the Brightfield condenser and place the Darkfield condenser into position under the stage, and it uses oil. It really is extremely important. We'll look at some examples as well, so you can see why this is so important. Okay, and then the 100 times objective. So the 100 times objective equipped that this microscope is equipped with has a built-in iris diaphragm. This is to control and regulate the amount of light going through the objective. Most standard objectives don't have this iris diaphragm in the objective, and you're not able to adjust the amount of light going through the objective, and that then makes it actually nearly impossible to see anything in dark field with the 100 times objective. Right, and
So
then
that's
lastly,
crucial then, yes?
absolutely crucial, yeah. So as I said, with our additional on-screen magnification, you would be using the 40 times objective for most of your analysis. You'll be able to identify all your live blood anomalies quite easily with the 40 times objective. But in some cases where there's a small structure moving around, perhaps a bacterial form or something like that, or pleomorphic growth form in dark field that you need to look at higher magnification, you're then able to actually use this 100 times objective, and then you achieve a magnification of 4,000 times on the screen, which is really, really quite amazing to have.
And that's what you need to see the microbial forms, yes?
Absolutely. So especially these small, fainter, pleomorphic growth forms that we usually look at the end of the dark field analysis, they would require a bit of additional magnification to actually see them clearly. So in those cases, we use this 100 times objective then.
Thank you.
Right, and then lastly, just the objectives. It is also very important just to look at that. We use high-grade infinity plan achromatic objectives. So this is a bit of terminology with objectives. We have different types of objectives. So you get a standard plan objective, and the plan achromatic objectives actually create a flat field of view. So the majority of the field of view that you're able to see through the eyepieces will be in focus. The cheaper entry-level type of objectives would only have the central area, about 60% the central area of the viewing field will be in focus, and at the periphery it won't be focused. So it just makes it a little bit more difficult when looking through the eyepieces. When you're scanning the sample, you're not really able to look at the entire field of view if you don't have this high grade plan achromatic objective. All right, so these other dark field microscopes, so invariably if you look at the specifications, you'll find firstly, the most important thing to look for would be the light source, the illumination, and you'll find that most of them, if they do have LED, it will be a 3-watt LED, and it's usually equivalent to about 20 watts halogen, or it might be a halogen microscope with a 20-watt or 30-watt light source. No, you need at least 50 watts halogen to be able to see clearly in dark field. So this is nowhere near bright enough to actually highlight the anomalies in dark field that you need to be able to see. If you do find, and I've seen this as well, many of the microscopes, the dark field microscopes online, don't actually specify the strength of the LED light source. It would say it's a bright and adjustable LED, but they don't actually say what the strength is. So it really is important in those cases to actually ask what the strength of the LED is, because invariably it will be 3-watt LED. All right, and then the magnification range on all other laboratory microscopes, they're configured so that the magnification through the eyepieces is the same as on the screen. It's a 1-to-1 magnification ratio between the eyepieces and the screen. Darkfield condenser then, most of these other microscopes are equipped with a rotating universal darkfield condenser. So it has a turret style condenser sitting under the stage that you're able to rotate and move into place then the dark field condenser, so you can go from bright field to dark field by just rotating the wheel. It really is very convenient. You're able to quickly change from bright field to dark field, but it uses a dry dark field condenser, and that actually there's no real value in terms of live blood analysis with these types of condensers. You're really not able to see nearly anything in dark field with these condensers. And we have some examples. You'll actually see the difference between the oil immersion and the dry dark field condenser. With a dry condenser, you basically see all the features that you'll see in a live blood sample in bright field just against a dark background, but you're not actually able to see the detail between the cells. All right, and then as I mentioned, that 100 times objective, have a look at the specifications on those microscopes. You'll find invariably that it is a 100 times objective. Sorry, there's a typo there. It should be 100 times, not 100 watt. 100 times objective with no iris diaphragm. All right, and then usually there's standard plan achromatic objectives, or you sometimes get the entry-level basic achromatic objectives. Right, so let's have a look at a few examples. We'll go through some examples of actual live blood samples where just one of those features have actually been changed, and we'll compare it to what it should look like. So the image on the left-hand side is with the HDMI-LED microscope with the 9-watt LED light source. Now, if the light source is changed, so this is still with a higher magnification level on the screen. You can see the magnification level there is the same. It's still with an oil immersion dark field condenser. The only difference here is that we're using a 20-watt halogen light source. And you can see the difference there very, very clearly. If we had some fermentation taking place around the thrombocytes, like we can see very clearly in this example on the left-hand side, it would not be visible at all in the system used on the right-hand side.
What about chylomicrons and
yeah, so chylomicrons, you can see a few spots on the right-hand side here, but not nearly as many as you should be able to see. And any pleomorphic growth forms, if there was perhaps a chondrite or some alpha-form bacteria moving around there. You might see some movement, but you won't really be able to see what it is. And another very common anomaly is actually the fibrin that we see in the plasma, of course related to liver stress. Very common finding. We see it in a very high number of people, and very important to address when you see it. And in this 20-watt system, you will only really see fibrin if it's really extreme.
So you won't really be able to see much pleomorphic forms at all then?
Not at all. No, you'll see basically what you're able to see in Brightfield, with a few, maybe 10% of the anomalies that you would need to see in Darkfield, and only really if they're quite severe.
And crystals?
Crystals you can see. So in the system with the 20-watt light source, you will see some crystals. They're very large, and the crystals we can see in Brightfield as well. An important one though with this system on the right-hand side is your white blood cells. White blood cell anomalies we look at in Darkfield. We look at the nucleus in the white blood cell. We also do a white blood cell count estimation by looking through the eyepieces. And because in Darkfield the granulocytes are highly reflective, they really stand out very clearly when looking through the eyepieces. So you're able to quickly count the number of granulocytes per viewing field. But on the system on the right-hand side, those granulocytes are not really going to be bright at all. So it really won't be possible to actually do a proper granulocyte estimation.
Okay, thank you. So you won't really be able to do a proper analysis at all?
Not at all, and that's with just the illumination. So even if the microscope has high quality objectives, the right type of Darkfield condenser, very good quality camera, all the other specifications could be fine, but if the light source is not providing sufficient brightness, then you really won't be able to see much at all. And this is a very common pitfall. A lot of practitioners, because of the low cost of these other microscopes, end up getting them, and they realize that they're really not able to see anything. They find that they're not really able to use them in practice, because they are missing so many anomalies. And then it's a case of having to try and sell a microscope, which is it's quite difficult. There's not a huge market for Darkfield microscopes that don't really have the correct features.
No, of course.
All right, fantastic. So we're moving on to the magnification range, and that is what I mentioned earlier. We have the additional magnification on these systems on the viewing screen. So this is with the 40 times objective, where we have 1,600 times magnification on the viewing screen. And this is really the ideal level of magnification to see the live blood anomalies clearly. We can see the thrombocytes, we can see if there's any fermentation around the thrombocytes, if there are any unusual shapes to the red blood cells, we're able to see that clearly. If there are any other structures between the cells, we're able to see it clearly as well. Now, if you have a system that has a good quality light source, and the correct Darkfield condenser, if everything else is fine and it doesn't have this additional magnification going onto the screen, you would inevitably get this level of the magnification here with your 40 times objective. So about a 400 times magnification on the screen. And you can see the difference there very clearly. If there was something small between the cells there, it really would be extremely hard to see exactly what it is. Right, and then the Darkfield condenser. So this is with the 1,600 times magnification, again the 9-watt LED light source here, and this is with the oil immersion cardioid Darkfield condenser. And if you compare that to the dry Darkfield condenser, that's the type of image that you'll typically get, and this is about the best that you can hope for with a dry Darkfield condenser. even if your light source is extremely bright and everything else is great on the microscope, dry Darkfield condenser just doesn't give you that level of clarity and contrast that you actually need to be able to see the structures clearly. So the structures in the plasma, like your thrombocytes, the chylomicrons, fibrin, all those common anomalies, not clearly visible at all with a dry Darkfield condenser. And then we also have a most likely a neutrophil at the top here. It's a granulocyte. The most common is, of course, the neutrophil. And they should actually be very bright and highly reflective in Darkfield, but you can see this white blood cell here is actually quite dull and quite gray. So again, you're not really going to be able to assess the white blood cell anomalies properly. All right, and then we have the 100 times objective. So this is also a very interesting one. So this is with the additional magnification. So we have about a 4,000 times magnification in this image here on the viewing screen with 100 times objective. And this is the objective with the built-in iris diaphragm. So in this case, we actually need to close the iris diaphragm about 90%. It's almost completely closed. So we really limit the amount of light going through the objective. This then enables us to actually get a clear picture like this in Darkfield. Now, without being able to reduce the amount of light, this is a standard 100 times objective in Darkfield, and there's just too much light being allowed through this objective for you to actually see anything clearly in Darkfield. They are okay for bright field. You will be able to see some of the cells and so on in bright field. It wouldn't be as quite as bad as this, but in dark field it really becomes extremely difficult to work with these standard objectives without the iris. All right, and then we've just put a picture, a comparison of two pictures here with your ideal HDMI-LED microscope with all the ideal features compared to what you typically would be getting with a 20-watt halogen or 3-watt LED standard laboratory microscope that's sold as a Darkfield microscope. So there you can see the difference. It's really quite shocking. So the magnification on the right hand side, there's around 400 times. The light source is not as bright as it should be. So for you to actually analyze a sample with that type of system would be really extremely difficult. All right, so that actually brings us to the end of the slides. Are there perhaps any other questions, Elizabeth?
Yes. Is an iris diaphragm manually adjusted?
Yes, absolutely. So on these 100 times objectives, there's a little ring in this objective that allows you to manually adjust the iris within the objective.
Okay, thank you. Any more questions, please put them in the box.
Right.
We seem to have answered them all for the moment. Sorry, were you going to add something there, Dr. Ocker?
Yes, just lastly, another important consideration is just the camera as well. And many of these cheaper Darkfield systems I've seen, they seem quite attractive and quite good because they often have a very high resolution camera, 14 megapixels or something like that, which seems really quite good. But there are some important things to look for there as well. The resolution is not necessarily the most important feature. Because we are looking at live samples, we're actually moving through and scanning through the sample with the client. So we have it displayed on the screen there. So for the video to actually be smooth, you need a fairly high frame rate, a minimum of 30 frames per second. So on the HDMI USB camera, we have a 60 frames per second frame rate at the full HD level of resolution, and this is quite rare. So if digital cameras, you'll actually find that as the resolution increases, the frame rate decreases. So many of these very high resolution USB cameras have a very low frame rate, which again makes it quite, you get quite a jerky type of video when you're using it at that resolution. So again, then you end up compromising, and you would usually then reduce the resolution to get a higher frame rate, and then you don't really have an ideal system again. And then lastly, on the camera as well, sensitivity is really important. Also something important to look for, because you need a fairly high sensitivity for dark field to actually show on the screen a dark field image that looks similar to what you're seeing through the eyepieces. If the camera doesn't have the correct level of sensitivity, you don't really get the same image on the screen as what you're seeing through the eyepieces, which can be quite frustrating, when you're trying to show your client something that you've seen through the eyepieces and it doesn't really show up on the screen. And then also important is for the camera to automatically adjust between bright field and dark field. So the HDMI camera has a fairly good system built into the camera that automatically adjusts the exposure from bright field to dark field, so that you don't really, as the analyst, you don't really have to adjust anything on your software when working with a microscope from going from one setting to the next. But with a lot of the other USB cameras, because they're not specifically developed for microscopy, and for dark field analysis, you end up often having to adjust the exposure settings and so on between bright field and dark field to actually see an acceptable image.
That doesn't sound very acceptable.
Yeah, it becomes quite inconvenient, when working with clients. If you have clients after each, one another, and going from bright field to dark field, and at the end of the dark field you go back to bright field for the dry blood, between each of those you have to adjust the settings on the camera. It really isn't ideal at all.
Not very smooth. The software of the camera is compatible with which computer systems?
That's a very good question. It's also an important one to check when comparing other systems. So our camera is compatible with Windows as well as Mac. So you have compatibility with both operating systems.
Thank you. And what level of magnification would be required to see individual damaged cells?
So your magnification for just most of your live blood anomalies, 1,000 times would be sufficient. Ideally, we'd want to get about 1,500 to 1,600 times. That gives you that view where you're able to see the details of the cell membrane quite clearly.
Okay, thank you. Any more questions, please put them in the box. Well, thank you very much for that, Dr. Ocker. That was very informative, and I'm sure it was very helpful to everybody. We will be sending you the recording of this over the next couple of days. We do have another question. The condensers always have to be removed to be changed? Do the condensers have to be removed to be changed?
Yes, absolutely. So they're interchangeable. So for bright field, you would have the bright field condenser under the stage, and then going to dark field, you would have to remove the bright field condenser and place the dark field condenser under the stage. It's just one screw that you actually need to loosen. It's a holding screw that allows you to slide the bright field condenser out and place the other condenser into position. So not really very difficult. It's less convenient than just turning the wheel on those turret style condensers. But as I showed on the slides, a dry dark field condenser really isn't a suitable option, for dark field analysis.
Okay, thank you. So yes, we'll be sending you the recording of this webinar. If you do have any more questions, or in fact, if we do get any further questions coming in later by email, what we'll probably do is put them on the email with the recording. So we might be adding a few more answers to questions there. If you have any further questions, or if you'd like to know more about LiveBlood online training courses or our microscopes, then please email us at info@livebloodlondon.co.uk. And if you want more information about LiveBlood Online and our training courses and microscopes, then you can also go to our website, which is www.livebloodonline.com. So we hope this has been helpful to you. We are here to help and advise you on choosing the right microscope, as well as helping you to avoid making any mistakes. So please don't hesitate to call us or email us if you're thinking of buying a microscope. We are here to help. So thank you very much for joining us, and please stay safe. And it's goodbye from me, and thank you very much, and goodbye from Dr. Ocker.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.